What is your greatest fear? Do you fear drowning in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and being eaten by a great white shark? Or maybe you fear going to the top of the tallest skyscraper in the world and falling off, at which point you'll plummet to your death. But maybe your greatest fear is spending alone time with yourself in solitude. Solitude doesn't appear to be something that we'd be afraid of. However, you would be surprised. In this video, I discuss 3 reasons why we fear solitude and 3 solutions that we can use to make solitude less fearsome. Now, each of these reasons why we fear solitude correspond with 3 of the benefits that solitude has to offer us. I talk about these 3 benefits in the first video in this series on solitude. You can check out that video by clicking the link to that video in the comment section down below. The first reason why we fear solitude is that we fear ourselves. Although solitude gives us the benefit of helping us develop a deeper relationship with ourselves, the process of developing a deeper relationship with ourselves demands that we go inward. It demands that we go into the dark recesses of our past, of our present, and our future. What that means is that we might have to deal with certain conflicts from our past that we don't want to have to deal with. We might have to face unpleasant emotions in the present moment that we don't want to face. And we might have to look forward to the future and pay attention to our anxieties and worries. None of these emotions and thoughts and conflicts are emotions, thoughts, and conflicts that we want to come into contact with. We fear these things sometimes. And as we fear these things, we also fear solitude because solitude forces us into contact with these things. Because solitude poses us with this fear of ourselves, it demands that in order to get the benefit of developing a greater relationship with ourselves, that we learn how to deal with our fear of ourselves. One solution that you can use to lessen your fear of yourself and your fear of solitude in turn is to begin a relationship with yourself by journaling or by developing a relationship with a spiritual leader or a wise family member who can help guide you through the difficult aspects of who you are. When you do that, solitude becomes less fearsome because you've got more comfort and security in being able to go into the deepest aspects of who you are. The second reason why we fear solitude is because we fear the feelings of discomfort that solitude forces us to get into contact with. Now, when you go into solitude, it will give you the great benefit of being able to stabilize yourself and gain peace as you move out of the everyday hustle and bustle. However, that process of moving from your everyday life to solitude is not necessarily a pleasant one. When you move into solitude, the discomfort that you have to deal with in that transition is not pleasant. And we fear that. Now, why do we fear that? Because a lot of the emotions that we have to experience when we make that transition are loneliness, the loss of support from people around us and from the structures around us, and the uncertainty of having to go it alone. These are very unpleasant mental and emotional states to have to go through. And a lot of people fear solitude because they don't know how to deal with a lack of support, they don't know how to deal with uncertainty, and they don't know how to deal with loneliness. Because of those things, solitude is to be feared. So how do you deal with that? What's the solution for managing the fear of discomfort as you move into solitude? One way to deal with that is to gradually move into solitude. Don't do it all at once. If you can't manage too much loneliness at once, don't do it. If you can't manage the uncertainty of not knowing where you're going to go, don't do it. If you can't manage a lack of support, the lack of support that solitude forces you into, don't do it. However, if you can do it gradually, little by little, like moving into a cold body of water little by little to adjust your body to it, then it becomes much easier. So don't force yourself into solitude. Don't force yourself into loneliness, uncertainty, and a lack of support. ease into it. When you do that, you'll gradually be able to deal with that fear of discomfort, and it'll be easier to gain the benefits of solitude. The final reason why we fear solitude is because we fear freedom. Now, in the United States, that sounds a little bit odd. We value freedom above everything else, and we strive for it as an ideal. However, it's very different to be free in a group or in a nation with strong traditions than it is to be free as an individual. Freedom comes along with it a set of responsibilities. When you are free, you must lead yourself. When you are free, you must support yourself, and you must deal with the threats to freedom. In a group or in a nation, there are established structures for leadership, for support, and for defense. But as an individual stepping into solitude, you don't have those traditions. What that means is that when you step into solitude, you have to do for yourself what you are accustomed to groups or nations doing for you. So one of the reasons why we fear solitude is because we don't know how to lead ourselves, we don't know how to support ourselves, and we don't know how to defend ourselves in a state of freedom. Now, freedom is a very great thing, and one of the values that solitude has to offer is freedom. Solitude can liberate us from the constraints of culture. It can liberate us so that we can think in new ways, feel in ways that we typically aren't allowed to feel, and operate in our lives in ways that we typically aren't allowed to operate. However, that comes with it all of these other responsibilities that I have just mentioned. So, learning how to not fear solitude is learning how to deal with freedom, learning how to lead yourself, how to support yourself, and how to create structures that enable you to defend yourself against the threats of freedom, the threats of solitude. So, in order to become more comfortable and secure in a state of solitude, in a state of freedom, you need to develop these capacities. So, what are some suggestions to be able to make solitude more manageable, to be able to make freedom more manageable? Well, the suggestion that I will offer, something that's practical for your everyday life, is to establish balanced relationships with the people that you're close to so that they enable you to return to group after you spend time in solitude, so that you can gradually move into solitude, into freedom, and develop the capacity to lead yourself, develop the structures that enable you to support yourself when you're in a state of solitude, and develop the capacity to defend yourself when you are in that state. If you develop those capacities, it becomes much easier to deal with the fear of freedom and the fear of solitude. When you then do that, you'll be able to get all of the benefits that solitude has to offer. There are good reasons to fear solitude. You might fear the self that you have to confront when you go into solitude. You might fear the feelings of discomfort that you move into as you progress into solitude. Or you might fear the responsibilities of freedom that solitude demands that you meet. However, if you know how to deal with these fears, if you can journal or develop a relationship with a wise elder, if you can gradually acclimate yourself to solitude, or if you can develop healthy relationships that enable you to move from connectedness to solitude and gradually develop the capacity to deal with freedom, to lead yourself, to support yourself, and to deal with the threats to freedom, the threats to solitude. If you can deal with these fears, then solitude becomes a much more manageable state, and you can benefit from everything that solitude has to offer. With Solitude Speaks, this is Carwin, and I hope you have a great day.